From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
February 20th, 1939. 20,000 faithful supporters attend a Nazi rally. They salute Hitler and wave Nazi flags. Swastikas adorn the hall as speakers give full voice to their anti-Semitic views.
America first. America first.
Yet this is not Germany. It's not even Europe. This is the United States of America.
In the 1930s, there was a huge German-American population. There were German newspapers, German clubs, German neighborhoods where everybody spoke German. The idea that there was fertile soil for a pro-German or even pro-Nazi sentiment in this country really isn't so hard to believe, because you had so many people who still very much identified with their German heritage.
Within the Nazi Party is the Auslandsorganisation, or overseas organization. Their aim is to foster Nazism and develop Nazi parties among overseas German populations. At its height, the Bund has over 25,000 members, consisting purely of American citizens of German descent. Their main aim is to promote the Nazi regime in the United States, and Kund has some big ideas.
I think he wanted to be the American Führer. I think he wanted to organize an overthrow of the American government. And he was not alone. There were quite a few people who wanted to overthrow the American government, throw Roosevelt out, make sure that Germany would be protected and Hitler would be protected, and America not get into the side, onto Britain's side in the war.
He believed, Kuhn, that if the Nazi Party could become a real political force and challenge perhaps the Democrats and Republicans, even with a view perhaps to some form of power sharing, if not power takeover at some point, he was guided, inspired by that notion, Kuhn, that he could in fact become a Hitler within the United States.
America first.
But the German-American Bund promotes more than just isolationism. They're openly supporting the Nazi regime, and they're part of a much larger organization.
They were folded into the larger umbrella of the group called America First. America First was a very strange conglomeration of far-right groups, very conservative, and far-left groups.
Some in the America First movement are high-profile figures and hold significant power.
Sadly, the Nazi ideology and anti-Semitism did have an appeal to some Americans, and in some cases, Americans with a strong technological bent. Henry Ford was famously sympathetic to the Germans, and so was Charles Lindbergh, the first person to have flown from New York to Paris, and a great admirer of German aviation, and a real defender of the Nazis in the pre-war era.
The Nazi movement is growing in pre-war America. Fritz Kuhn, leader of the German-American Bund, calls himself the American Führer, and his youth camps openly foster Nazism. But they're now attracting the attention of the US government. February 20th, 1939. 20,000 people attend a mass rally to show their support for the Nazi Party.
And where do you think this is? Right in Madison Square Garden, USA.
Swastikas and Nazi banners hang beside the Stars and Stripes.
And this is Fritz Kuhn, leader of the German-American Bund, hiding behind the American flag, but taking his orders from Berlin and copying the methods of Berlin.
The crowd is offered up a series of hate-filled speeches full of fiery rhetoric. They denounce Jews and even President Roosevelt himself, repeatedly calling him Franklin Rosenfeld and labeling his New Deal the Jew deal.
Kuhn and his men were there in the Nazi uniforms, and there were some really scurrilous speeches made about democracy, about the downfall of democracy, about how corrupt democracy was, about the need for a strong leader, about the undermining of American institutions, and of course their hatred of Jews.
Fritz Kuhn tries to legitimize his organization as patriotic by holding up the first president of the United States, George Washington, as their idol and inspiration.
They had this tremendous picture of George Washington, as if somehow George Washington represented their point of view. You know, it was Washington's birthday when they had the rally. I don't know who came up with the brilliant idea to put Washington above the dais.
Outside Madison Square Garden, 50,000 anti-Nazi demonstrators gather. 1,700 policemen struggle to stop them storming the building. Picketing has been banned in an attempt to keep the peace, but clashes break out. But Hitler has far bigger plans for America.
I think it's true to say, and he goes on record in his notorious table talk, that he regards America not as a nation at all, really. He thinks it's been defiled by the Jews, by the Negroes, as he put it, and he saw the Americans as being completely devoid of culture.
Hitler's belief in a racial hierarchy confirms in his mind America's inferiority. Eventually, they will be subjugated by a master race.
Fox News has spent years normalizing white supremacy, and white supremacists and neo-Nazis are celebrating. But since Trump's election, they've taken it to a whole new level. Trump has been openly and repeatedly signaling to white supremacists since the campaign, by retweeting them, by refusing to immediately disavow them, and now by defending them.
Very fine people.
And Fox News is right there to validate him at every turn. Look what happened after white supremacists committed terror attacks in Charlottesville.
This week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after?
How long before they show up at Mount Vernon? How long before they show up at Monticello?
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides.
Fox claims that Trump has done everything he can to condemn these groups, so everyone should just relax about it.
If the critics out there can't accept anything ever, they're not on our side as Americans.
They tell their viewers to be more understanding of where Nazis are coming from.
There's a reason those people were out there. Some of it is outright racism and needs to be condemned. A lot of it, though, is I feel like my country is slipping away.
These conversations are tough to have.
Then they praise Trump for not jumping to any conclusions.
Is he supposed to do what Barack Obama used to do and jump to a conclusion?
Perhaps the president was thinking, you know what, we don't have all the facts.
And they make the most ridiculous comparisons to argue that white supremacy isn't that big of a deal.
The same people that are demanding that the Confederate flag comes down are the same people that are insisting that the rainbow flag goes up.
And they just randomly take it upon themselves to defend white nationalists. Take Tucker Carlson, who literally promoted a social media app that's been called a haven for white nationalists.
A pro-free speech platform, so it's been popular with Milo Yiannopoulos.
No one is asking them to do this. What happens when white supremacists hear their ideas being repeated on a major news network and also coming out of the White House?
Daily Stormer, which was one of the most pro-Trump sites, in fact, they called themselves the #1 Republican website in the country for a while, called Donald Trump their glorious leader. This site also adores Tucker Carlson.
I don't even know what white nationalism means.
We talked to Heidi Byrick at the Southern Poverty Law Center, where she leads the Intelligence Project. She's an expert on these white supremacist groups and has been tracking them for years.
It builds their ranks, right? Because instead of being considered racist kooks by the majority of people, if their ideas are verified in places like Fox News or places like Breitbart, whatever the case might be, they have something to point to say, I'm not extreme.
And they rode Trump's coattails into mainstream politics.
I think that white supremacists do consider Trump to be one of them.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
Now, that doesn't mean he shares every single idea that the white supremacists do, but think about the things he's done. First of all, let's look at his policies. They are rabidly anti-immigrant. These people want nothing more than to stop what they consider a Latino invasion of the United States and swamping out whites, right? The Muslim ban is something that's attractive to them. These are people who think every Muslim is a terrorist, they're horrible people, they need to be thrown out of the country. In fact, they want to throw all minorities out of the country.
And the whole time, Fox News paved the way for their rise by feeding extremism to their viewers.
Fox has been the biggest mainstreamer of extremist ideas, right? Ideas, for example, of a border wall, that comes right out of the white supremacist playbook. The horror of this is that people turn on their TV, they go to cable, you assume this has got to be mainstream, right? All this stuff must be middle American thinking, and what you find are radical right ideas being pushed on Fox.
One man's nativist is another man's Americanist or patriot.
Fox News will continue to elevate white supremacists for as long as Trump does. And that's why it's more important than ever for credible mainstream outlets to get these stories right.
I feel like at this point, for most news outlets, it's more important than ever to cover this movement. You have to talk about them. You have to talk about their role in politics in the US. You have to talk about their ideas. You have to talk about the domestic terrorism that's inspired by white supremacy. And you have to talk about hate crimes.
White supremacists and neo-Nazis are out in the open. A major news network is defending them, and our president is elevating them.
As astounding as it is to think in 2017, with this multicultural, multi-ethnic, diverse society that we live in, the fact of the matter is that white supremacy is hitting a high that it has not seen in decades.